Snow whipped across Silver Ridge Pass like a living thing, biting through jackets and scarves, lashing at the trees until the forest groaned in protest. Somewhere up the mountain, a yellow school bus had vanished into the whiteout. Phones buzzed at the sheriff's office, frantic parents calling, their voices breaking through static. Sheriff Grant gripped the receiver, staring at the map before him. Every hour counted. Every minute the children were out there in the storm was a minute closer to tragedy. Inside the office, the tension was palpable. Volunteers were calling in, checking on supplies, plotting routes through a mountain that seemed impossible to cross. Outside, the wind screamed, dragging snow in sheets, burying tracks before anyone could see them. And then, in the corner of the room, a figure stirred, a scarred German shepherd with a limp. Bear, trained to read danger like second nature, paced anxiously. His ears twitched. His eyes glimmered with urgency. He knew something the humans hadn't yet figured out. Sheriff Grant looked at his team, voice low but firm. "We're losing them if we don't act now." And just like that, the race began, not against time, not against the storm, but against the unknown, with Bear silently leading the charge. The bell at Silver Ridge Elementary rang with a shrill echo that seemed to carry farther than usual, as though even the mountains were waiting for the rush of children who came tumbling out into the pale winter morning. It was the Friday before winter break, and the schoolyard vibrated with laughter, shouts, and the slap of boots against packed snow. Some of the younger kids dragged their backpacks like anchors, too excited to care, while older ones darted in and out of the crowd pretending to pelt each other with invisible snowballs. Parked at the curb was the long yellow school bus, its paint dulled from years of salt and weather, its windshield fogged by the slow, steady breath of the heater inside. At the wheel sat Mrs. Allen, a woman in her late 50s, whose eyes had the softness of someone who had shepherded generations of children up and down these mountain roads. Her gray-streaked hair was tucked neatly under a wool cap, and her thermos of coffee steamed beside her. She leaned out the door as parents guided their children forward. "Bundle up now. Forecast says it'll be a cold one," she said, her voice gentle but commanding, like a grandmother with a streak of iron. Snowflakes drifted lazily from a cloud-thickened sky, settling on coats and scarves. Mr. Hanley, whose daughter clung nervously to his sleeve, asked, "You think you'll beat the storm, Ruth?" He always called her by her first name, a sign of the town's small intimacy, Mrs. Allen smiled, though her eyes darted briefly to the horizon where gray shadows loomed. "We've handled worse. The pass can be tricky, but I'll get them home safe." The girl finally let go of her father, climbing the steps of the bus. She offered Mrs. Allen a shy smile before hurrying to the middle row. One by one, children filled the seats. The air inside grew warm with chatter, the sound of mittens squeaking against windows, the thud of boots in the aisle. A group of boys in the back were already singing Christmas jingles in off-key unison, while a pair of second graders huddled over a shared comic book. The smell of peanut butter sandwiches and crayons lingered in the confined space, familiar and oddly comforting. The radio on the dashboard crackled with the steady drone of a local station. Winter storm advisory in effect for Silver Ridge County. Heavy snowfall expected by late afternoon. Motorists are urged to avoid unnecessary travel, especially along mountain passes. Mrs. Allen reached over and turned the volume down. The children didn't need that kind of worry. She whispered almost to herself, "We'll be home before it hits full force." Outside, Parents waved, stamping their feet against the cold pavement. The snow picked up slightly, dusting their shoulders like powdered sugar. Mrs. Allen checked her mirrors, glanced once more at the gathering clouds, and shut the folding door with a familiar hiss. The bus rumbled forward, its tires crunching over frozen slush. The children erupted in cheers, as if the ride itself was an adventure. Mrs. Allen allowed herself a smile. In her 30 years of driving, she had seen countless storms, countless worried parents, countless school days like this one. And yet, in the pit of her stomach, a small unease gnawed quietly. She pushed it aside, focusing on the winding road that led them toward the mountains. As the bus climbed steadily higher, the world outside became softer, muffled. Snow lay like a quilt across the fields, and the evergreens stood silent and watchful, their branches sagging under white weight. Inside the bus, the children pressed their noses to the glass, drawing little hearts and initials in the condensation. 8-year-old Lily, always the storyteller of her class, began whispering tales of mountain giants who woke only when the snow grew deepest. The younger children leaned close, half frightened, half delighted. Her eyes shone with that strange mixture of innocence and responsibility that some children carry far too early. Mrs. Allen caught her reflection in the mirror and felt a pang. Lily reminded her of her own granddaughter. It made her tighten her grip on the wheel. They passed through the small mining town of Silver Creek, its handful of shops already shuttering against the coming storm. A man in a thick coat stood outside the diner, salting the steps. He lifted a hand as the bus rolled past. She waved back, but the snow was thick enough now that his outline blurred almost immediately behind them. The radio crackled again, a voice muffled by static. Visibility dropping along Silver Ridge Pass, winds increasing to 25 miles per hour. The words hissed and popped before dissolving into white noise. Mrs. Allen exhaled slowly, steadying herself. She thought of the promise she had made so many times before. Get them home safe. Always. The bus groaned as it climbed the first steep incline. Inside, laughter bounced from seat to seat. But beneath it, there was a new current, a restlessness that even the children could sense. Snowflakes no longer drifted lazily. They whipped sideways, streaking across the windows in frantic patterns. The heater rattled, coughing out air that was no longer warm. Several children zipped their jackets up to their chins. The youngest pressed mittened hands together and whispered questions Mrs. Allen couldn't hear. Still, the bus pressed on, golden against the endless white. For now the children's world was small. Songs, stories, fogged windows. But outside, the storm was already waiting. A patient predator crouched above the pass. And in the driver's seat, Mrs. Allen's unease deepened, though she said nothing. She simply adjusted her cap, tightened her hands on the wheel, and whispered under her breath, "Let's make this quick, Lord. Let's get them home." The bus groaned as it began its climb up Silver Ridge Pass, the winding mountain road that cut between cliffs of stone and walls of towering pines. Snowflakes, once lazy and harmless, now struck the windshield like handfuls of white sand. The wipers squealed across the glass, fighting to keep the world outside visible. Inside the bus, the mood was still loud, still childlike, but beneath the chatter there was a subtle tremor, a sense that the ride had shifted from routine to something harder, more uncertain. At the very back, 3 older boys tried to lighten the air. "Hey, Lily," one of them called, leaning over the seat. "Bet the snow giants are coming for you first." He made a clawing motion, his gloves squeaking against the vinyl. The younger children squealed, some hiding their faces, others pretending bravery. Lily rolled her eyes, but she hugged her little brother closer, whispering something in his ear that made him relax. The laughter that followed was nervous, breaking off too quickly, as though everyone knew jokes didn't feel the same in weather like this. Mrs. Allen adjusted her grip on the wheel. The steering column vibrated faintly under her hands, and the heater rattled again, a hollow cough that made her glance at the dashboard. The air that trickled from the vents wasn't warm anymore. It was lukewarm at best. "Don't you quit on me now," she muttered under her breath, giving the heater a small tap with her mittened knuckle. She didn't want the children to hear the edge of worry in her voice. The road tilted higher. Through the window, the trees blurred into grey shadows. Visibility dropped by the minute. What had been a curtain of snow was becoming a wall. It pressed against the bus, erasing landmarks, erasing the horizon. 8-year-old Max craned his neck to look outside. "I can't see the town anymore," he whispered. His words were almost swallowed by the chatter, but Lily heard them. She gave him a reassuring smile, though her eyes flicked nervously toward the windshield. In the front row, 2 second-graders had stopped their game of tic-tac-toe on the frosted glass. They watched the storm instead, their small hands pressed flat against the cold window pane, as if searching for something steady to hold on to. The older kids, sensing the shift in atmosphere, grew restless. Teasing turned to bickering, voices sharper now. One boy shoved another, his laugh too loud, too brittle. Mrs. Allen raised her voice, firm but not unkind. "Enough back there. Save your energy. We've got to climb ahead." Her words settled the bus into a reluctant quiet. The only sound was the groan of the engine straining uphill, the relentless hiss of snow against glass, and the faint hum of children breathing into scarves and mittens. The heater rattled again, longer this time. A metallic clang echoed under the dashboard. Several kids looked up, alarmed. Mrs. Allen forced a smile into the rearview mirror. "It's just old parts talking. This bus has seen more winters than you have. She'll hold on." But the way her jaw clenched gave her away. The mountain loomed higher. The pass narrowed, hugging the edge of a steep drop where the valley disappeared into mist. Normally, the view was breathtaking, endless trees rolling into distant peaks. But now it was only white upon white, snow erasing sky and earth alike. The children shifted uneasily. Their songs had faded. The cheer of almost Christmas was gone, replaced by whispers. The older ones exchanged glances that said what they wouldn't dare admit. The road felt dangerous. Then came the lurch. The tires spun briefly on a slick patch of ice. The bus jolted, sliding half a foot sideways before the treads caught again. Several children screamed, clutching their seats. One little boy began to cry, pressing his face into his mittens. "Shh, shh. It's all right," Mrs. Allen said quickly, though her pulse spiked. She steadied the wheel, her knuckles white. "We just slipped a little, nothing more." Everyone stayed seated. But she knew it wasn't nothing. The road was only going to get worse from here. At the midpoint of the climb, the storm thickened again. Snow came down in sheets, hammering the roof with a steady drumbeat. The headlights reached only a few feet before dissolving into grey. The world beyond the bus had vanished entirely. Inside, it was warmer than outside, but not warm enough. Children rubbed their hands together, puffed breath into their gloves. Lily took off her scarf and wrapped it around her brother's shoulders, ignoring her own shiver. The teasing had stopped altogether. Even the rowdy boys in the back were silent now, their eyes fixed on the windows, as if watching the storm could tell them how long it might last. Mrs. Allen felt every vibration in the wheel, every groan of the engine. She glanced at the radio, tempted to turn it on again, but what good would another warning do? She needed focus, not fear. Still, her mind whispered what she didn't say aloud. We should have never tried the past today. And the heater rattled one more time, louder than before. This time, several children gasped. The sound had a finality to it, like an old machine giving up. Though the vents still hummed, the air that flowed was cold, cold enough to fog her breath. Mrs. Allen swallowed hard. She pressed her lips into a line, forcing calm into her voice. "Everyone, put your hats and gloves back on. We'll be fine, but we need to stay bundled." The children obeyed without protest. Even the smallest sensed something was shifting. The road curved sharply. Mrs. Allen leaned into the wheel, eyes straining to see. Her shoulders ached from the tension. In the mirror, she caught sight of 32 pairs of eyes, some wide with fear, others narrowed with the kind of forced bravery children wear when they're trying not to cry. It hit her then, like a weight pressing on her chest. She wasn't just driving a bus. She was carrying every heartbeat on it. She whispered again, almost a prayer. "Hold together. Just hold together." And outside, the storm answered with another gust, rattling the windows, as if testing how much more the bus and the people inside it could endure. The climb grew steeper. The bus's old engine strained against the incline, its growl vibrating through the floorboards. Every child could feel it beneath their boots, the shudder of effort, the uncertain pull forward, as though the vehicle itself was beginning to doubt. Snowflakes, once a curtain, now came like volleys of white arrows slashing across the glass. The headlights pushed against the storm, but gained nothing. Beyond the windshield, the world was a blur of white and shadow. Then it happened. The tires lost their grip. The bus lurched sideways with a guttural screech, rubber burning against ice. Children screamed. Several clutched at the seats in front of them. Others grabbed hands blindly. For a terrifying second, it felt as if the entire bus might slide backward down the mountain. Mrs. Allen gritted her teeth, her hands locked on the wheel. "Come on, girl," she whispered to the bus itself, her voice sharp with fear. She pumped the accelerator lightly, then eased back, trying to coax the wheels into catching again. But the tires spun uselessly, whining in protest. Snow kicked up in sprays against the wheel wells. The bus didn't move forward. It only shuddered, rocking slightly, as though held in place by nothing but willpower. "Why aren't we going?" a small voice piped up from the middle row. Panic seeped into the words. "Stay calm," Mrs. Allen called out, forcing strength into her tone. "We just hit a slick patch. Happens all the time. We'll get through it." But the words were as much for herself as for them. Minutes dragged. She tried again, pumping the pedal, shifting gears, but the response was the same. Tires spinning, bus shuddering, no traction. Each attempt sent another ripple of fear through the children. Their earlier chatter was gone now, swallowed by the storm, and replaced with the ragged breaths of 32 frightened souls. Then the heater gave a violent cough and rattled into silence. The faint stream of lukewarm air ceased entirely, leaving nothing but the bitter cold creeping back in. The children knew it instantly. Some pulled their coats tighter. A few began to cry softly, muffling their faces in mittens and scarves. Mrs. Allen's chest tightened. She tried the radio, flicking the switch. Static. A low hiss filled the bus, sharp and merciless, but no voice answered. She adjusted the knob, searching for the sheriff's frequency. The hiss only grew louder. She switched channels. Still nothing. "No, no, no," she whispered, slamming the heel of her hand against the receiver. The silence on the other end was heavier than noise. It was final, absolute. She leaned forward, holding the mic close. "Dispatch, this is Route 7 on Silver Ridge Pass. I'm stalled on the incline. Passengers on board requesting immediate—" The line cut mid-sentence, dissolving into dead static. She released the button, tried again, but the radio gave nothing back. For the first time in years of driving, Mrs. Allen felt small behind the wheel. A hush fell over the bus, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the fragile, trembling silence that comes when children realize the adults don't have all the answers. 32 pairs of eyes turned to her, waiting for reassurance, waiting for the strong, steady voice that had guided them through dozens of winters. Mrs. Allen forced herself to turn in her seat. Her lips curved into a smile, but her eyes betrayed the storm building inside her. "Everything's fine," she said softly, carefully. "We're just waiting it out. Roads get tricky, but the plows will be out soon." But even as she spoke, snowdrifts were already piling higher along the sides of the bus. The wind howled, pushing against the frame, rattling the windows in their seals. Frost etched jagged patterns across the glass, like the claws of some invisible hand. The children could feel it, the world closing in. Lily, clutching her brother, looked toward the front. Her voice was small but steady. Is it supposed to snow this much?" Mrs. Allen opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. For a long moment, the only sound was the storm pressing against the metal walls of the bus, a deep, unrelenting roar. One of the older boys tried to laugh. "It's just snow, right? We're fine." But his voice cracked, betraying him, and the laugh died in his throat. The younger kids heard the tremor and began to whimper. The sound spread like a ripple across the seats, soft cries, frightened whispers, the restless shifting of boots on the floor. Mrs. Allen turned back to the wheel, gripping it as if holding on to her own composure. She pressed the ignition again. The engine rumbled, but the tires spun uselessly, squealing against the ice. Each attempt felt more desperate than the last. The bus didn't move. Outside, the snowdrifts were rising. Already, the lower half of the windows were covered, white pressed in from every side, turning the bus into a coffin of steel and glass buried in the mountain's grip. Inside, the air grew colder by the minute. Children huddled closer, their breaths visible in the dim light. A little girl whispered through chattering teeth, "I can't feel my fingers." Another began coughing, harsh and wet, her small chest heaving. The sound sliced through the silence like a warning bell. Mrs. Allen's heart clenched. She tried to hide it, but the fear was written across her face. The storm outside roared on, relentless, drowning everything in its path. The bus sat helplessly on the incline, 32 children, and one weary driver trapped within. With no sound left except the howl of the wind and the muffled sobs of children trying not to be afraid. It was the first sign of trouble, and in her heart, Mrs. Allen knew it would not be the last. Afternoon on Silver Ridge usually lingers, with pale light stretching across the mountains until supper hour. But on this day, the storm devoured time itself. It was only a little past 3 when the light outside the bus began to die, as if the sun had abandoned them altogether. The snow clouds thickened, turning the world into a dim grey cave. By the time the clock on the dashboard ticked toward 4, it already felt like night. Inside the bus, the air grew colder, sharper. Every exhale from the children rose in a visible plume, fogging the windows until frost patterns spread like cracks across the glass. Tiny fingers traced shaky drawings in the condensation, stick figures, hearts, a sun that no longer shone outside, but the drawings blurred within seconds as the cold claimed them. Mrs. Allen sat rigid in her seat, her hands still on the wheel, though the bus hadn't moved for nearly half an hour. Her breath misted too, betraying the dropping temperature, but her face remained set in calm determination. She knew 32 children were watching her every move, clinging to her composure the way sailors cling to the last mast in a storm. "All right," she said, her voice loud enough to reach the back rows. "We're going to keep ourselves busy until the plows come through. Does anyone know a good song?" A few timid voices answered. Then she started softly, "Jingle bells, jingle all the way." At first, only a handful joined. Their voices cracked, uncertain, as though they knew the song couldn't cover the reality pressing in from outside. But Mrs. Allen smiled anyway, nodding her head in time, coaxing them louder. Soon the bus was filled with a patchwork chorus, off-key, halting, but steady enough to make the silence step back for a while. Yet even as the children sang, her voice betrayed her. The tremor in it wavered like a loose string, quivering at the edge of breaking. She tried to hide it, but the oldest children noticed. They exchanged worried glances, their eyes darting from her face to the storm-darkened windows. The snow beat against the roof like fists. The walls creaked. The headlights, still on though dim, cast a pale circle no further than the hood. Beyond that circle was only blackness, thick, suffocating blackness. A boy in the second row tugged at his sleeve, whispering to no one in particular. "It's night already?" "It's not night," Lily whispered back. Her own voice was steady, though her arms were wrapped around her little brother for warmth. "It just looks like it." "It'll be fine." But the boy shook his head, eyes wide. "It feels like night." The song faltered. Voices faded one by one until only Mrs. Allen's voice remained, thin and trembling. "Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh." The last word trailed into silence. That was when it came. The small, fragile voice from the very back. A kindergartner, bundled in a puffy coat 2 sizes too big, leaned into the aisle and whispered the question no one wanted to ask aloud. Are we going to die here?" The words froze the air more than the storm could. Mrs. Allen turned in her seat, her face softening. She wanted to answer quickly, firmly, to shut the thought down before it spread. But the silence that followed the question was heavy. Dozens of eyes shifted toward her, waiting for reassurance. She smiled, or tried to. "Of course not, sweetheart," she said gently, her voice breaking on the last word. "We're just waiting for help. People know where we are. They're on their way." But even as she spoke, she thought of the dead radio, of the snowdrifts rising higher against the sides of the bus, of the fact that the headlights now reflected off nothing but white, like the bus was encased inside a snow globe. The child nodded, but curled tighter into his seat, hugging his backpack to his chest. Around him, the other children absorbed her answer like a thin blanket. Not quite enough to cover them, but something to hold on to. Minutes dragged into something slower, heavier. The storm howled without pause, pressing against the metal shell of the bus, as if testing for weakness. Inside, the cold gnawed at toes and fingers, making children shift uncomfortably in their seats. A few coughed, a few whimpered quietly. Mrs. Allen knew fear could spread like a fever. She forced herself to stand, walking slowly down the aisle. Her boots echoed on the floor. She touched shoulders, adjusted scarves, tucked coats around little bodies. "We're okay," she whispered over and over, as much for herself as for them. At the back, she knelt by Lily and her brother. Lily was humming quietly, her lips close to her brother's ear, distracting him with stories about their father's hiking trips. Her eyes met Mrs. Allen's, and for a moment, The weight of responsibility shifted from adult to child. Lily's gaze was calm, but it was a borrowed calm, one that cost her dearly to hold. Mrs. Allen squeezed her hand. "You're helping more than you know," she murmured. Lily nodded, then straightened her shoulders, humming louder so the younger children around her could hear. By 5 o'clock, the darkness was absolute. The storm had erased every sense of time. The children couldn't see beyond the frosted glass, couldn't tell if the world outside even still existed. All they had was the bus, their own breath clouding the air, and the steady growl of the storm pressing in. Mrs. Allen returned to the driver's seat. She glanced at the silent radio again, then quickly away. Her hands shook as she rubbed them together, trying to spark warmth back into her fingers. In the back, the same kindergartner whispered again, quieter this time, as if to himself, "I don't want to die." No one answered. But the silence that followed was more terrifying than any scream. The storm outside had found its rhythm, a steady roar that pressed against the walls of the bus, shaking the windows in their frames. Inside, the children sat in uneasy silence, their breaths fogging the air, the dim glow of the overhead lights casting pale circles across anxious faces. For the past hour, the heater had rattled and groaned like a sickly animal, coughing bursts of air that were more noise than warmth. Mrs. Allen tapped the side of the panel with the heel of her hand, whispering encouragement, as though the machine could hear her. "Stay with me. Just a little longer." Then it happened. A grinding sound echoed from beneath the dashboard. The vents shuddered. A final wheezing gust of cold air pushed through, and then nothing. The heater fell silent. The stillness that followed was heavier than the storm. The children knew instantly. Their breath thickened into clouds that hung in the air. Within minutes, the bus grew colder, as though the storm outside had finally slipped through the cracks and claimed the inside as its own. "Why isn't it warm anymore?" a small boy asked, his mitten tugging nervously at Mrs. Allen's sleeve. She forced her lips into a smile. "It's just resting. Don't worry, we'll keep each other warm." But even as she said it, her heart sank. She knew the truth. Without heat, the temperature inside would plummet with every passing minute. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice. The children gasped. The bulbs overhead glowed faintly, sputtering as though drowning. A few seconds later, they blinked out completely. Darkness swallowed the bus. Several children screamed. Others began crying openly now, their small bodies curling in on themselves. The only light came from the storm outside, a pale glow that leaked through the frosted windows, eerie and weak, like moonlight through ice. The bus was no longer a shelter, it was a tomb. Metal walls trapping 32 fragile lives inside, with nothing but the storm to remind them of how small they were. Mrs. Allen stood slowly, feeling the weight of their fear pressing down on her. "All right, listen to me," she said firmly, her voice echoing louder than she felt. "We're going to sit close together. Body heat will help us. Everyone moves in, no one sits alone." Reluctantly, the children obeyed. They shuffled toward the center rows, huddling shoulder to shoulder. Older kids wrapped their arms around younger ones. Coats and scarves were tugged tighter, mittens pressed against faces. The aisle filled with a tangle of knees and boots and trembling hands. But for the first time, no one argued about space. Lily guided her brother into the circle and then tugged 2 smaller children against her sides. "Here," she whispered. "We'll share warmth. Pretend we're a campfire." Her words steadied them, though she herself shivered violently, her teeth clicking in the dark. Mrs. Allen moved through the rows, adjusting scarves, smoothing hair damp with melted snow. Good. That's good. Stay close. Keep moving your fingers and toes. Don't let them get numb. Her hands shook, but her voice held its strength. For a few minutes the sound of the storm filled the silence, broken only by sniffles and soft whimpers. Then came a cough. It was sharp, harsh, cutting through the cold air like the crack of a whip. Everyone turned toward the sound. A little girl, no older than 7, sat with her back against the seat, her face pale. Her cough came again, violent, racking her small body. She pressed her mittened fists against her chest, wheezing. "Emma," one of the children whispered. The cough grew worse. She struggled for breath, her voice breaking. Panic spread like fire through the bus. Children's eyes widened, some crying harder, others pressing closer together as if the sound itself carried danger. Mrs. Allen dropped to her knees beside the girl. "Shh, sweetheart. Breathe slow for me. Just slow." She unzipped the girl's coat slightly, pressing a hand to her chest, feeling the shallow rise and fall. The cold was taking her faster than the others. "Is she dying?" A voice whispered from the back, trembling. The question shot through the children like lightning. A ripple of terror moved from seat to seat, as if the whispered words had given shape to their worst fear. "No," Mrs. Allen said sharply, louder than she intended. Her voice cracked, but she forced it steady. "She's not dying. She just needs calm. We're all going to be all right." She rubbed the girl's back gently, rocking her as if she were her own. "Breathe with me, darling. In, out. That's it. Just like blowing out candles." The girl coughed again, weaker this time, but after a few moments her breathing steadied. She slumped against Mrs. Allen's chest, exhausted. The children stared in silence, the storm's roar filling the space where their courage had once been. One boy whispered, "It's too cold. We can't stay here." Another answered, his voice breaking, "What if nobody comes?" The bus filled with sobs again. Fear was no longer hidden in whispers. It poured out, raw and unrestrained. Mrs. Allen held the coughing girl tighter, closing her eyes briefly. Her own body shook with cold, with fear, with the crushing weight of 32 lives depending on her. For a moment she wanted to cry too, but she couldn't. She stood, lifting the girl gently into her arms and laying her across 2 seats, covering her with an extra jacket. Then she turned to the others. "Listen to me," she said, her voice ringing through the frozen bus. "We are not giving up. Do you hear me? We are together. That's what matters. We're going to make it through this storm." Her words trembled, but they held something fierce, something the children needed. Still, as the minutes dragged on, the darkness felt heavier. The storm raged, frost thickened on the windows, and though the children huddled together, sharing warmth, they all knew what none dared say aloud. The bus had become a frozen tomb, and every heartbeat inside it was now a race against time. The bus was dark, cold, and too quiet. The only sound was the storm pounding against the metal shell, and the occasional whimper of a child trying not to cry. Fear had settled over them like the snow outside. Heavy, suffocating, and impossible to shake off. Mrs. Allen sat in the front, her eyes fixed on the silent radio, her mind turning like the wheels that refused to move. She kept her face turned away so the children wouldn't see the tears frozen at the corners of her eyes. For the first time in her 30 years behind the wheel, she had no answers. It was then that a small, steady voice rose from the cluster of children in the middle rows. "Hey, do you guys want to hear a story?" Heads turned. In the dim glow of the frosted windows, 11-year-old Lily sat with her arms wrapped around her younger brother, Max. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, but her eyes carried a quiet strength that felt older than her years. At first no one answered. The children huddled tighter, waiting for the storm to end, waiting for Mrs. Allen to say something, waiting for anything other than silence. Lily's voice didn't falter. "My dad used to take me hiking up these mountains. He said the snow looks scary from far away, but if you pay attention, there are paths hidden under it, trails that only reveal themselves if you keep walking. He said the mountain always leaves signs for people who don't give up." Max looked up at her, eyes wide, clinging to her words like a rope in the dark. Slowly, the others leaned closer too, their faces pale and tired, but their ears reaching for her voice. She went on, her voice soft but clear. "One time, we got stuck up by Eagle's Peak. The snow was so deep I thought we'd never get out, but Dad pointed to these little pine branches sticking out, just enough to show us where the trail was buried. We followed them down, one by one, until we were safe." A boy across the aisle whispered, "What if there aren't any branches this time?" Lily met his gaze. For a moment she hesitated, then she smiled. Not a big smile, but the kind that feels real even when it hurts. "Then we make our own trail." "Dad always said the mountain respects the brave." The boy nodded, his fear easing just a little. More children shifted closer, pressing their bodies against one another for warmth, their eyes fixed on Lily as if her words carried the only light left inside the bus. "Another time," she continued, "we camped out near the ridge. It was freezing, just like now. I thought I couldn't sleep because the wind was too loud. But Dad told me the mountain sings at night, that if you listen, it's like a lullaby. He said the wind was just reminding us we weren't alone." One of the youngest girls, shivering with a blanket pulled over her head, peeked out and whispered, "So, the storm isn't trying to scare us?" "No," Lily said gently. "It's just singing too loud, but that means someone will hear us. Someone always hears." Her brother Max leaned into her side, whispering so only she could hear, "Do you really think so?" Lily looked down at him, her eyes fierce despite the cold. "I know so." The children clung to her words. Their breathing slowed. The sobs softened. Even Mrs. Allen, listening from the front, felt her shoulders loosen just a little. She turned her head and saw Lily surrounded by faces. Pale, frightened faces that, for the first time in hours, looked less like they were about to break. Lily's voice wove through the darkness like thread, pulling them together. "Dad told me something else too. He said people are like campfires. When you're alone, the flame is small, and it can go out. But when you're together, the fire grows. That's what keeps the mountain from winning. It's not the trail, or the map, or even the sunlight. It's people staying close, refusing to let the fire die." The words lingered, wrapping around them warmer than any blanket. A boy whispered, "So we just have to keep our fire alive?" "That's right," Lily said firmly. "If we keep it alive, the mountain can't beat us." Something shifted then. The children pressed closer, shoulders touching, hands gripping hands, as though trying to build that fire Lily had spoken of. Some began humming softly, recalling the songs Mrs. Allen had led earlier. Their voices were quiet, broken, but no longer trembling with fear. Even the kindergartner who had whispered about dying earlier now whispered something else. "We're a fire. We're not going out." Mrs. Allen closed her eyes, swallowing hard. She knew Lily's father had died years ago in a climbing accident. She had driven the girl on field trips when the funeral was still fresh. Yet here she was, carrying his words into the storm, saving 32 children with stories that cost her everything to tell. Fragile courage, yes, but courage all the same. Hours passed, but the atmosphere inside the bus was different now. Fear was still there, gnawing at the edges, but something stronger had taken root in the center. Lily kept talking, her voice steady even when her body shivered violently. She told them about campfires and trails, about nights when the mountains seemed endless but morning always came. She painted pictures of stars above the ridge, of fox tracks in fresh snow, of how the world always looked brand new after a storm. Her words didn't banish the cold. They didn't fix the broken heater or restart the bus or stop the storm clawing outside. But they gave the children something just as vital, hope. And in that frozen tomb of steel and snow, hope was enough to keep 32 small fires burning through the night. The storm had swallowed Silver Ridge whole. Snow spun in wild circles outside the wide front windows of the sheriff's office, reducing Main Street to a ghostly blur of headlights and drifting white. The flag outside whipped and snapped like it was trying to tear free from its pole. Inside, the heater rattled against the cold, but couldn't keep up. Boots stamped on the floor, and the smell of wet wool and coffee filled the air. Sheriff Tom Grant stood at his desk, leaning over a spread of maps that showed every switchback and ridge of the mountain roads. His thick hands, roughened by decades of work in the high country, pressed down on the paper as if he could steady the storm by sheer force of will. The phone rang again and again, each ring stacked on the last, until the room buzzed with the sound of fear. Deputies hurried back and forth, answering lines, scribbling notes, their faces tight. "Sheriff," Deputy Collins called, covering the receiver with his hand. His young face was pale. "That's the 6th parent asking about the school bus. They're saying it should have been back over an hour ago." Grant looked up, his brow furrowing deeper than the scars time had already carved there. "Route 7? "Yes, sir." He closed his eyes briefly. Route 7 meant Silver Ridge Pass, the highest, most treacherous climb in the county. He had warned the district about running buses today. He had told them the forecast was bad enough to cancel early, but the decision had been made, as it always was, by people sitting behind warm desks. And now, the radio on the desk crackled faintly, static. He reached for it, adjusting the dial. "Bus 7, do you copy?" Only the hollow hiss answered him. His jaw clenched. By 4:30, the office was packed. Parents crowded in, their coats dripping snow on the tile floor. Some clutched phones, others held each other, their eyes wide with the kind of fear that stripped away any pretense of calm. "My little girl should have been home by now," one mother said, her voice shaking. She wrung her scarf in her hands until the fabric twisted like rope. "It's not like her to be late. Not in this weather." "They're out there in the dark," another father said, pacing near the door. His voice broke as he added, "They're just kids. My boy doesn't even like the cold." The storm outside howled, rattling the window panes. The sound made everyone flinch. Grant raised his hands. His voice carried the weight of authority, steady but not unkind. "Listen to me. We don't have confirmation yet, but we're treating this as overdue. We've already tried radio contact, and there's no answer. That means they could be stuck. That means they need us moving now." Murmurs filled the room, sharp, desperate, angry. A grandmother in the corner whispered a prayer, her rosary beads clicking softly in her hands. Deputy Collins crossed the room, handing Grant another slip of paper. "That's 14 calls, Sheriff. All parents of kids on Route 7. His voice dropped. "We're losing them if we don't act now." The words struck the room like a bell. Silence fell, thick and heavy. Grant straightened, his shoulders squaring as though he'd been preparing for this moment all his life. He turned to the crowd of parents, his eyes scanning their faces one by one. He thought of his own daughter, grown now, but once just as small and vulnerable as the children on that bus. "We'll find them," he said firmly. "I swear it to you. No storm, no night, no mountain is going to take our children." The office sprang into motion. Maps were spread wider across the desks. Radios checked, snowmobiles prepped, lanterns readied. Deputies moved like a single body, their boots echoing across the floor. Grant stood at the center, directing with a voice that cut through the chaos. "We'll split into 2 teams. Collins, you take the north approach. Ramirez, you run the ridgeline from the quarry side. Keep in constant contact. If the radios die, you stick to the markers and listen for the horns." Someone asked, "Sheriff, you think the bus could have gone over?" The question froze in the air. Grant's gaze hardened. "We don't talk about that, not yet. Right now we talk about finding them alive. That's the only thing I want in your heads." Another phone rang. A father answered before the deputies could. "Yeah? Yeah, I'm at the office. They know." His voice cracked as he turned toward Grant. "That's my wife. She says the dog's been pacing the yard since the bus was due. Just pacing, barking at the storm." Grant's eyes narrowed. He didn't need the name. He already knew. There was only one dog in Silver Ridge that had instincts sharp enough to matter in a storm like this. "Bear," he said under his breath. The German shepherd, scarred and limping but legendary in the county, was more than just an old K9. He was a compass when machines failed, a creature who had saved lives when radios went silent. Grant looked at his deputies. "Get Rowan and bring the dog." The storm slammed against the building, shaking it to its bones. The parents pressed closer to the windows, watching the snow bury the town inch by inch. Fear hung in the air like frost. Grant grabbed his coat, heavy canvas lined with wool, and pulled his hat low over his brow. He turned to the parents one last time. "Stay here. Stay warm. We'll bring them back." A mother clutched his arm, her eyes wet. "Please, please don't let them freeze." Grant met her gaze, his voice a promise carved in stone. "Not while I'm breathing." With that, he stepped into the blizzard, the cold slamming into him like a wall, the storm trying to tear the words from his mouth before they could become truth. But inside his chest, the vow burned hotter than the snow could ever freeze. The search had begun. The storm had turned Silver Ridge into a battlefield of wind and snow. The sheriff's office emptied in a rush of heavy coats, rifles of light slung over shoulders, and the metallic clink of carabiners against harnesses. Outside, the world was already buried in white, Main Street unrecognizable under mounds of drifting snow. Behind the fire hall, the garage doors rumbled open, spilling weak yellow light into the storm. Inside, volunteers and deputies swarmed over the equipment bay, like soldiers preparing for war. Snowmobiles lined the walls, their engines coughing to life one by one. Lanterns were filled with kerosene, their glass globes glowing faintly, fragile against the storm that could swallow them whole. Bundles of rope and ice axes were laid out on tarps, each item checked twice. Sheriff Grant strode down the line, his voice steady, his eyes sharp. "Check everything again. Radios, flares, blankets. If one thing fails out there, it won't just be us that pays. It'll be the kids." The men and women nodded, their breath puffing white in the frigid air. Some were seasoned mountain rescuers, faces weathered and calm. Others were parents themselves, fear carved deep into their expressions. But all of them moved with purpose. In the corner, Deputy Ramirez tightened the straps on his snow goggles. "Silver Ridge Pass in this storm?" he muttered to Collins. "It's suicide." Collins pulled on his gloves, jaw tight. "Yeah, but leaving those kids out there isn't an option." Ramirez didn't argue. His silence spoke louder than words. Lanterns were handed out. Their glow flickered against helmets and hoods, casting long shadows on the walls. Flares were distributed, the red tubes like lifelines in cold hands. One volunteer, a logger named Whitaker, tied extra rope around his waist, muttering to himself like a prayer. Near the back, a younger deputy hesitated, staring at the storm raging beyond the open doors. His knuckles whitened on the strap of his pack. Grant noticed. "Are you afraid?" the sheriff asked, voice neither mocking nor soft. The deputy swallowed. "Yes, sir." Grant nodded once. "Good. Fear keeps you alive. Just don't let it freeze you. You move when I say move, and you don't stop until those kids are found. Understand?" The deputy's chin lifted. Steadier now. "Yes, sir." At the far end of the garage, Officer Mark Rowan knelt beside his partner. Bear, the scarred German shepherd, stood tall despite his limp, his thick coat bristling in anticipation. Rowan adjusted the dog's harness, securing reflective strips and clipping on a short rescue lead. Bear's ears flicked back and forth, tuned to something beyond the storm, a sound only he could sense. His breath plumed in the cold, steady, certain. Grant paused as he passed them, his eyes meeting Rowan's. "Has that dog ever failed you before?" Rowan shook his head. "Not once. Not in war. Not in peace." "Then tonight's no different," Grant said. Rowan glanced at Bear, his hand brushing the dog's scarred flank. "He knows. He's been restless all day, like he's been waiting for this." The storm howled against the doors. Snow swept into the garage in icy waves. The volunteers lined up, snowmobiles revving, headlights cutting weak tunnels of light into the blizzard. Grant climbed onto a crate so his voice could rise above the engines. "Listen up. Silver Ridge Pass is a death trap in this weather. You know it, I know it. But there are 32 kids out there who don't care how dangerous it is. They just want to go home. That means we don't hesitate. We don't waste time. We go in, and we bring them out." Murmurs of agreement spread through the line. "Stay in pairs. Never lose sight of each other. If radios die, and they will, you stick to rope lines and flares. If one of you stumbles, 2 more pull him out. Nobody goes missing tonight. Not us. Not them." The words were steady, carved deep, and they rooted themselves in every chest that heard them. Collins strapped on his pack and muttered, "Feels like we're walking into the belly of the mountain." "Then we walk in loud enough it chokes on us," Whitaker growled, slamming a lantern shut. Nervous laughter flickered for half a second, breaking the tension just enough to let everyone breathe again. Outside, the storm waited. The first snowmobile lurched forward, headlights stabbing into white nothingness. The rope line trailed behind it, volunteers gripping tightly, their bodies hunched against the wind. Lanterns bobbed like ghostly fireflies in the dark. Bear barked once, sharp and piercing, before bounding into the snow beside Rowan. The sound cut through the storm like a promise. Grant pulled his scarf over his mouth, the wind biting at his skin like knives. He lifted his arm, signaling forward. "Silver Ridge won't take them," he shouted over the storm. "Not tonight." And with that, the rescue team moved into the blizzard. Snowmobiles growling, lanterns swinging, ropes tightening, doubt gnawing at them with every step, but determination driving them deeper into the storm's heart. In the far corner of the fire hall garage, away from the noise of engines and the frantic preparation, A German shepherd paced in a restless circle. His nails clicked sharply against the concrete, a sound that cut through the storm's muffled roar outside. His coat, once the sleek black and tan of a young working dog, was streaked with white scars across his flank and muzzle, reminders of battles survived long before this night. This was Bear, Silver Ridge's most famous canine, retired in name only. His left hind leg carried a limp, the aftermath of an injury from a search and rescue years ago when an avalanche buried 3 skiers on Eagle's Peak. The limp didn't slow him tonight. If anything, it made his pacing more urgent, his movements like a drumbeat of insistence. Something is wrong, something is calling. Officer Mark Rowan, his longtime handler, crouched beside him. Rowan was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s, the kind who looked unshaken in a fight, but carried weariness in his eyes. He had lived through deployments overseas, mountain rescues, and the long, silent drives home after missions that ended in tragedy. And through all of it, Bear had been at his side. Rowan reached out, resting a gloved hand on the dog's shoulders. "Easy, boy," he murmured, though his voice held no conviction. Bear didn't stop. He circled again, ears pricked forward, eyes locked on the bay doors, where the storm howled beyond. Each time he passed the door, his paw scraped against it, claws scratching the metal as if demanding it be opened. "He knows," Rowan muttered under his breath. Sheriff Grant noticed from across the room. He walked over, his boots crunching on a patch of ice tracked in from outside. "What's wrong with him?" Rowan didn't look up. "It's not wrong. He can feel it, out there." He tilted his head toward the storm. "Feel what?" Grant asked. Bear punctuated the question himself. Stopping suddenly, he barked once, sharp and deep, then shoved his body against the door hard enough to rattle it on its hinges. The whole garage fell silent for a beat. Mark scratched behind Bear's ear, the gesture more for himself than the dog. "I've learned not to question it. When he gets like this, something's out there, something that needs us." Bear pressed against the door again, scratching, whining low in his throat. His eyes glowed in the lamplight, fixed on a place no human could see. He was a dog caught between 2 worlds. The safe concrete room filled with men and machines, and the storm outside where children's lives hung in the balance. Rowan felt the same pull in his chest. He had seen it before. Bear restless in the middle of the night, only to lead him at dawn to a missing hiker clinging to life under a fallen tree. Bear trembling outside a warehouse years ago, only to uncover a hostage tied in the basement. The dog's instincts had never been wrong. "Sheriff," Rowan said quietly, "if you want a compass tonight, you're looking at him." Grant studied the dog. The scars, the limp, the unwavering focus. For a moment, his hardened face softened. "That animal looks half broken," he said, almost to himself. Rowan gave a grim smile. "So do I. Doesn't mean we can't get the job done." Bear barked again, scraping furiously at the door as though time itself were running out. The sound was not the playful bark of a pet. It was the commanding voice of a soldier who refused to be ignored. A few of the younger deputies shifted uneasily. "It's like he knows those kids are out there," one whispered. "He does," Rowan said simply. The bear's pacing grew faster. He circled once, twice, then planted himself firmly at the door, muscles tense, ears forward, body rigid like an arrow pointing into the storm. He whined again, sharp and insistent. His tail didn't wag. His whole frame vibrated with one clear message. "Let me go." The storm rattled the metal doors as if answering him. Snow swirled through the gaps at the edges, dusting the floor with white powder. The scent of ice and pine drifted in, and Bear inhaled sharply, nose quivering. Rowan tightened the straps on the dog's harness. His fingers moved with ritual precision, fastening the reflective bands, securing the lead, clipping the carabiner shut. His hands shook not from cold, but from urgency. "You feel it, don't you?" he whispered into Bear's ear. "They're out there, and you're not going to stop until we bring them home." The shepherd pressed his head against Rowan's chest, just for a moment, then turned back to the door with renewed intensity. Sheriff Grant finally gave the order. His voice carried above the storm's muffled roar. "Open the doors!" The deputies hesitated. To step outside meant surrendering to the blizzard. But the sheriff's tone allowed no argument. The garage doors creaked, then rumbled upward. A blast of wind slammed inside, spraying snow across the floor, extinguishing 2 lanterns instantly. Men and women turned their faces away, scarves pulled higher, goggles fogging. The bear surged forward against the lead, muscles straining. Rowan barely held him back. The shepherd barked once more into the night, a sound that pierced the storm, echoing off invisible cliffs. It wasn't just a bark, it was a summons. The rescuers looked at each other, doubt gnawing their faces. The pass was nearly impossible in this weather. Radios would fail, snowmobiles would bog down, lanterns would die. But as Bear strained toward the mountain, there was no hesitation in his body, no doubt in his voice. For the first time that night, hope had a shape, and it had 4 legs. The doors of the fire hall slammed open, and the storm rushed in like a living thing. The rescuers leaned into it, shoulders hunched, eyes squinting against the knives of snow that cut across their faces. The world outside was white chaos, no horizon, no landmarks, just a swirling sea of ice and wind that erased everything familiar. Bear lunged forward first, his harness pulling taut in Officer Rowan's hands. His paws sank deep into the drifts, but he pressed on without hesitation, carving a path into nothingness. Behind him, lanterns bobbed, their glow pitifully small, swallowed within seconds by the storm. Sheriff Grant barked orders over the wind. "Fan out. Stay in pairs, 20 feet between each team. Keep the rope lines tight." His words were carried off almost as soon as they left his mouth, but the rescuers moved, spreading into the storm like fragile sparks cast into an ocean of darkness. The snowmobiles roared, engines straining, treads slipping against the drifts. But even their headlights could barely cut more than a few feet ahead. Everything beyond that was swallowed whole. Radios crackled uselessly. "Copy," one voice stammered through static, then dissolved into a hiss. Grant tried again, raising his mic. "Unit 2, report." Static answered. "Unit 3, status." A garbled shout, drowned by white noise. Then silence. Grant lowered the radio slowly, his gloved hand tight around the receiver. He didn't need confirmation. He knew. The mountain had already claimed their technology. Out here, it was man, beast, and storm. Nothing else. The rescuers pressed on, heads bent low. Snow stung like glass on their cheeks. Lanterns flickered, the light bouncing weakly off the snowflakes that swarmed like wasps. For every step forward, the storm shoved back with 2. Deputy Collins stumbled in the drifts, his knee striking ice. Whitaker, the logger, caught him with a rope line before he could sink further. "On your feet!" Whitaker shouted, his voice ragged. "Don't you dare stop!" Collins staggered upright, nodding through clenched teeth. Fear had etched itself into his face, but he forced his legs onward. The storm showed no mercy. Every gust howled like the voice of the mountain itself, telling them to turn back, to surrender. Through it all, Bear led. His head was lowered, ears pinned against the wind, eyes sharp. He didn't falter. He didn't hesitate. Every few steps he barked into the storm, the sound cutting through like a flare, guiding the rescuers behind him. Rowan stumbled at his side, the lead tight in his fist. Snow clung to his beard. His breath came ragged, but he kept pace. He trusted the dog more than the compass strapped to his chest. "Wherever you're taking us, boy," he muttered through frozen lips. "I'm with you." Minutes blurred into hours. The mountain seemed endless, its ridges and gullies transformed into alien shapes under the snow. The rescuers moved past half-buried road signs, their tops barely visible above the drifts. A school zone marker bent under the weight of ice, its cheerful paint almost mocking in the darkness. Everywhere, the storm pressed closer, swallowing sound, light, and hope. At one point, Ramirez raised his lantern high, squinting into the swirling white. "I can't see the team ahead," he called. His voice trembled, barely audible. "Stay on the rope," Grant shouted back. He tugged the line, felt the faint pull of the next pair, and exhaled. The connection held, thin, fragile, but still there. Still, doubt gnawed at every man and woman on the mountain. Whitaker muttered, "Even if the bus is up here, how do we find it in this?" He gestured helplessly at the storm that erased everything, that made the world 5 feet wide and nothing more. Grant's eyes narrowed. "We don't question it. We move. We listen." He turned his gaze toward Bear, who was already pulling ahead again, straining at the harness. "And we follow him." Bear's paws cut into the drifts, his nails scraping ice, leaving marks that vanished seconds later under the avalanche of falling snow. But his direction never wavered. His body seemed tethered to something beyond human perception, something that called to him through the storm. Lantern light dimmed as the storm thickened further. One by one, the rescuers realized their vision was closing in, the circle of light shrinking to the space directly before their boots. The rest was black and white chaos. Collins muttered under his breath, a prayer or a curse. No one could tell. Ramirez's lips moved soundlessly, counting each step as if the numbers might keep him sane. The storm pressed harder, its howls rising like a chorus of unseen voices. The mountain was no longer just terrain. It was alive, hostile, and ancient. A force that had seen generations pass and had no interest in surrendering its hold tonight. Yet still, Bear pressed forward. The shepherd stopped suddenly, ears pricking, body rigid. He barked, low and sharp, then pulled against the lead with renewed force. Rowan stumbled after him, nearly losing his footing. "What is it, boy?" he called. Bear answered with another bark, louder this time, then pushed into the snow as though trying to carve a tunnel through it. His tail was stiff, his body vibrating with certainty. Grant raised his hand, signaling the team to halt. All around them, lanterns bobbed uncertainly, radios hissing with static. The only true sound was the wind and Bear's voice cutting through it. For the first time in hours, the rescuers felt something stir in their frozen chests. Not warmth, not yet, but direction. And in a storm designed to erase everything, direction was hope. The mountains swallowed the rescuers whole. Lanterns bobbed like weak stars, their light quickly strangled by the storm. The rope lines stretched thin between teams, trembling in the wind like the last threads of connection. Snow pressed in from every side, burying tracks within seconds, erasing even the memory of the road they had once trusted. Through it all, Bear strained against his lead. His body was rigid, his muscles taut, his nose cutting the air in sharp bursts, as if every particle of wind carried a message only he could read. He pulled forward, head low, tail stiff, barking into the storm with a raw urgency that made every rescuer pause. "Hold him back, Rowan," Ramirez shouted, his voice nearly torn away by the gale. "He's gonna drag you off the route." Rowan stumbled, boots sinking into the drift as Bear pulled again, harder this time. The shepherd's nails scraped ice under the snow, his growl vibrating through the lead. His body was a compass needle trembling toward its true north. "He's not guessing," Rowan shouted back, his breath steaming. "He knows." The mapped route lay to the right, a narrow switchback road carved years ago into the ridge, now almost invisible under the storm. It was the safer path, the logical path, the one the maps said would lead to the pass. But Bear wasn't pulling right. He was dragging left, toward a wall of snow and trees that disappeared into the blizzard like the edge of the world. Collins yanked the rope line taut. "We'll lose the trail if we follow him. You know what happens up there. Cliffs, gullies, worse." Bear barked again, cutting across the argument. His paws dug furiously at the snow. Then he looked back once, eyes blazing in the lantern light, before surging forward again. Rowan's heart hammered. He'd seen this look before. In Afghanistan, when Bear had torn free from him to claw at rubble, only to uncover a soldier buried alive. In the foothills 2 winters ago, when Bear refused to move past a frozen stream until they found the old hunter collapsed just yards away. The dog had never been wrong. The storm pressed harder. Grant stumbled toward Rowan, his scarf crusted with ice. "Rowan," he bellowed, "hold your line. Stay on the damn route." Rowan met his eyes. Snow clung to his lashes, but his voice was steady. "With respect, Sheriff. If we ignore him, we don't find them." The words landed heavy. Every rescuer within earshot felt the weight of them. Trust the map, or trust the dog. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, broken only by the roar of the storm and Bear's desperate barking. Then Rowan said it, low but fierce, the words almost ripped from his throat. "Trust him." The rescuers hesitated, fear carving deep lines in their faces. The map was the only thing tethering them to logic, to safety. Abandoning it meant stepping into the unknown. Cliffs hidden beneath snow, ridges that could crumble under their boots, ravines waiting to swallow them whole. But then Bear let out a howl that cut through bone. It wasn't just sound. It was a command. It was a certainty. It was the voice of a creature who knew. Rowan loosened the lead and followed. "Rowan, damn it!" Grant barked, but even his words lacked conviction. He saw the way Bear moved, not with hesitation, not with chance, but with purpose. Rowan didn't stop. "You said it yourself," he called back, his voice ragged. "Those kids don't care about maps. They care about getting home, and he's the only one who can take us there." The rope line stretched, bending off the marked route. Volunteers looked at each other, then at the storm, then at Bear's silhouette straining forward. One by one they followed, boots crunching into deeper drifts, lanterns swaying wildly. Whitaker spat into the snow and muttered, "To hell with maps." He tugged Collins along. "I'd rather follow a dog with scars than paper that can't breathe." Grant cursed under his breath, but at last he moved too, jerking his line to signal the rest. "Fine. But if we're wrong, Rowan, it's on your head." Rowan didn't answer. He only bent lower against the wind, matching Bear step for step. The shepherd moved with ferocity. Every few yards he stopped, nose buried in the snow, body trembling, then surged forward again. He barked into the darkness, each note carrying further than the human voice could. His tail never wavered, his ears never faltered. He was tethered to something no one else could see. A scent, a sound, a whisper carried on the storm. Rowan's chest burned with cold, his muscles screamed, but he kept his eyes fixed on the dog. "Take us to them, Bear," he whispered hoarsely. "Don't stop." The storm seemed endless, the mountains stretching into infinity. But for the first time since they had stepped into it, the rescuers weren't wandering blind. They had a path now. It just wasn't one on any map. Behind them, Collins muttered to Ramirez, "We're following a limping dog into a storm that eats lanterns whole. You realize how insane this is?" Ramirez pulled his scarf tighter. "Yeah, but I'd rather follow his instinct than my fear." Bear barked again, sharp and insistent, pulling harder into the storm. The rescuers followed, and the mountain, for all its rage, seemed to shift around them, as though the storm itself was being challenged. Not by men, not by maps, but by the fragile, unbreakable instinct of a scarred shepherd who refused to let go. The storm had become a living thing, an endless wall of sound and white that swallowed breath and thought alike. Every step the rescuers took sank them deeper into drifts that threatened to trap their legs, their lanterns flickering and fading until even their own shadows were gone. The rope lines trembled under the strain of the wind, stretched so thin they felt ready to snap. But Bear pressed on. The German shepherd's body moved with raw certainty, his paws pounding against snow that devoured human boots with ease. His lead pulled taut, jerking Rowan forward step by step. The dog's nose cut the air, his chest heaving, every muscle straining, as though he carried the weight of all 32 children himself. Suddenly, he stopped. His ears pricked, his body stiffened, and for one long second, the storm's roar seemed to hesitate. Then, Bear threw back his head and howled. The sound tore through the blizzard like a blade. It wasn't a bark, short and sharp. It was a howl, long and piercing, a primal cry that carried across the white void. It rose above the shrieking wind, bounced off unseen canyon walls, and echoed back in fragments, multiplying until it seemed the whole mountain was answering him. The rescuers froze where they stood. The howl didn't just cut the storm. It filled the emptiness inside them, the fear that had been gnawing since they left the fire hall. For the first time, they felt anchored, as if the sound itself gave them direction in a world that had none. "Holy God," Whitaker whispered, his breath frosting in the air. "It's like he's calling to them." Rowan tightened his grip on the lead, his throat thick. He had heard Bear howl before, in combat zones, in forests, on rescue missions, but never like this. This wasn't instinct. This was a command. "Do you hear that?" Ramirez called, voice hoarse. Collins shook his head. "All I hear is a dog howling." "No," Grant said sharply, his eyes fixed on the silhouette of Bear against the storm. "That's not just sound. That's the direction." Bear howled again, his voice splitting the storm like lightning. The echoes bounced off the canyon, off ridges hidden in the dark, creating layers of sound that the rescuers clung to. Each echo told them where the cliffs were, where the gullies opened, where the mountain bent and shifted. It was sonar, primitive, raw, but true. The team stumbled forward, using the echoes like a map no human could draw. Lanterns swung wildly, illuminating only a few feet ahead, but the sound of Bear's howl gave them a rhythm to move by. Rowan leaned into the wind, shouting over the storm. "Keep your ears open. Follow the echo." Step by step, they moved, no longer blind. Bear howled. The sound reverberated, and they turned, adjusted, shifted their lines to follow where the echoes pointed them. Each howl carved a tunnel through the blizzard, a fragile thread of sound that kept them alive. Minutes bled into an hour. The rescuers stumbled, fell, rose again, but Bear never faltered. His voice cut through the storm again and again, even when his throat grew raw, even when blood stained the corners of his mouth from the strain. Rowan saw it, his chest tightening. "Easy, boy," he whispered, though he knew Bear wouldn't stop. Not until they were found, or he collapsed trying. The storm fought back with renewed fury, snow driving sideways like shards of glass. 2 lanterns sputtered out, their flames choked by the wind. Darkness pressed closer, heavier. But then Bear howled again, longer, louder, his body vibrating with the effort. The rescuers stumbled forward, clutching ropes, their boots dragging. The sound was their lifeline, their anchor, their compass in the storm. For the children inside the bus, the night was silent, but for the wind. But for the rescuers, the night had a voice now, and it belonged to a scarred shepherd who refused to be ignored. Whitaker wiped the frost from his goggles, his lips trembling. "If we make it out of here, it won't be because of us. It'll be because of him." "No," Rowan corrected, his voice breaking as he stumbled after his partner. "It'll be because of us following him." The echoes carried further this time, bouncing differently off the canyon walls. Grant's head snapped up, his instincts flaring. "Do you hear that? The sound's tighter. We're close to something." Bear barked once, sharp and commanding, then let out another howl, shorter but urgent, his whole frame straining forward. The rescuers looked at one another. Even in the storm, they could feel it, a shift, a pull, as though the mountain itself had changed. They weren't wandering anymore. They were being led. Bear staggered once, his limp showing more with each step, but he refused to slow. His howls came faster now, each one a flare in the darkness. The rescuers adjusted course with every echo, stumbling after him, following not just a dog, but a force of will, greater than the storm itself. Rowan whispered through chapped lips, half to Bear, half to the storm, "Guide us, boy. Just keep guiding us." And the shepherd answered with another howl, so piercing, so unrelenting, that for a moment, even the storm seemed to bow. The bus had gone silent in a way no school bus ever should. No laughter, no teasing, no songs. Only the muffled sound of children crying into scarves and mittens, their voices flickering like candle flames, fighting a draft. Frost crept across the ceiling, delicate veins of ice glowing faintly under the dim emergency light. Each breath rose into clouds, freezing against the windows until they became opaque walls of white, sealing the children from the world outside. The air was sharp, biting at skin. Children huddled in tight clumps, shoulders pressed so close they blurred together. Some rocked, whispering prayers they barely understood. Others stared blankly, lips tinged blue. At the front, Mrs. Allen sat rigid in the driver's seat. Her swollen hands, hidden deep in her sleeves, had gone blue at the fingertips. She wouldn't let them see. They needed her steady, smiling, even when her lips trembled. A boy whispered from the third row, "Mrs. Allen, why is it so cold?" She turned, forcing her smile wider. "Because the mountain wants to see how brave we are, and you're the bravest kids I've ever met." Spines straightened. Small heads lifted. Even in fear, children wanted to believe they were brave. Mrs. Allen drew strength from their eyes, though inside her heart pounded with dread. The storm battered the bus like fists, each gust making the frame groan. Children flinched at the rattling windows. "It sounds like it's trying to break in," a girl whimpered. "No," Lily said quickly, holding her brother. "It's just the wind singing. My dad said the mountains sing when they're angry." Mrs. Allen pressed the useless radio again. Static, nothing more. Her head sagged against the cold plastic, but a child's cough jolted her upright. She forced composure back into her face. Minutes stretched like hours. Some children drifted into uneasy sleep, shivering violently. Others clutched backpacks like shields, their eyes fixed on Mrs. Allen as if she alone held the storm at bay. "What if no one comes?" someone whispered. "Someone will," she answered firmly. "I promise." Her voice trembled, but she spoke with enough strength to carry through the silence. Night deepened. The ceiling light flickered, then died, leaving only the faint glow of snow filtering through frozen glass. The children looked ghostly in the pale light, years stolen from their faces. Mrs. Allen clenched her aching hands tighter in her sleeves, thinking of parents waiting in town, of the 32 children watching her every move. She could not falter. Another cough came, then another. Panic rippled. A boy sobbed, burying his face in his knees. His friend rubbed his back awkwardly. In the darkness, children began to care for one another, fear burning away quarrels and leaving only survival. Mrs. Allen whispered, "Just hold on." The bus groaned under the snow's weight, the cold a living presence pressing into lungs and bones. At the center, Lily held Max against her side, rubbing his arms furiously as his small body trembled. Around them, younger children whimpered, clutched dolls, whispered for their mothers. Silence itself had become dangerous. Lily felt it spreading like frost, threatening to consume them. She drew a sharp breath, steadying her voice. "Listen to me. Someone will come." Blank faces stared back. She repeated it louder. "Did you hear me? Someone will come." Max whispered, "But what if they don't?" She lifted his chin, forcing his eyes open. "They will. My dad said when you're lost in the mountains, you never give up. Even if you can't see them, they're coming." Turning to the others, she said more firmly, "The grown-ups know we're missing. They won't stop until they find us. That's what people do when kids are in trouble. They come." "But how do you know?" a boy asked. "Because I promise. And a promise is stronger than the storm." She pulled the smaller children closer. "Say it with me. Someone will come." At first, only Max whispered it back. Then 2 more joined. Soon, a chorus spread through the bus. "Someone will come. Someone will come." The words grew louder, fragile but real. They clung to them like ropes in the dark. Lily urged, "Louder. Don't let the storm drown you out. Make it hear you." Voices rose again. "Someone will come. Someone always comes." Mrs. Allen turned in her seat, watching Lily with awe. The girl's lips were blue, her voice shaking, yet she carried herself like a soldier rallying her unit. "Good girl," Allen whispered to herself. The mantra circled the bus, whispered into mittens, murmured against shoulders, repeated like prayer. It became rhythm, heartbeat, survival. A girl with a torn doll pressed her face into Lily's coat. "You promise?" "I promise," Lily said, steady. "And I don't break promises." Time dragged, but the atmosphere shifted. The storm still howled, frost still spread, but fear dulled into fragile resolve. The children's eyes no longer stared blankly. They had words now to hold on to. Max leaned close. Do you really believe it? Lily thought of her father's words, of rescuers she couldn't see, of parents waiting. She kissed his forehead. Yes, I believe it. Fragile as glass, her belief was enough. One by one, the children curled together, whispering the mantra as they drifted into uneasy sleep. Someone will come. Someone always comes. At the front, Mrs. Allen trembled, her frozen hands aching. But the whispers carried her too. A small fire had been lit, and the storm could not extinguish it. Hours crawled past. The mantra still lingered in the dark, though voices had grown weaker. The frost on the ceiling thickened until shards began to fall, sprinkling onto heads like cruel snow. Breaths grew shallow, movements sluggish. The air grew heavy, filled with uneven gasps. Then it happened. A boy, near the back, slumped sideways, his head lolling, mittened hands falling limp. Children nudged him, whispering his name. When he didn't stir, whispers sharpened into cries. Mrs. Allen! She was already moving, stumbling down the aisle on stiff legs. Dropping beside him, she yanked off her gloves, pressing icy fingers to his cheek. His skin was too pale, too cold. She shook him gently. Come on, sweetheart. Open your eyes. Nothing. Her hands tightened, shaking harder. Don't do this to me. Not tonight. The children watched, wide-eyed, their whispers rising into dread. Why isn't he moving? What's happening? Mrs. Allen rubbed his arms furiously, slapped his mittened hands together, tears freezing on her cheeks. Please, she begged, voice breaking. Please, baby, breathe for me. The bus fell into unbearable silence. 31 children held their breath, their fear thick as the storm. Then, with a shallow gasp, the boy stirred. His chest rose weakly, his eyes fluttering open. The children exhaled in unison, relief surging through the bus like a wave. Mrs. Allen pressed her forehead to his, sobbing once before catching herself. She kissed his temple, her tears chilling instantly against his skin. There you are. There you are. She wrapped him in an extra coat, pulling another child's scarf over his chest, tucking it tight. She held him close until his trembling returned, faint but present. But the damage was done. The silence after his fainting had left a scar. The children looked at one another with wide, terrified eyes. For all Lily's brave promises, for all the whispered mantras, the truth was undeniable now. The storm wasn't just cold. It was hunting them. If one of them could slip so quickly toward the edge, so could any of them. Lily hugged Max tighter, whispering fiercely into his ear. See? He's okay. He came back. But her own eyes glistened in the pale frostlight. She had seen the stillness. She had felt the weight of those terrible seconds when the boy hadn't breathed. Max buried his face in her coat, too young to argue, too frightened to believe. Mrs. Allen stayed kneeling by the boy long after he stirred, one hand resting firmly on his chest, as if willing his heart to keep beating. Her other hand, raw and red from the cold, trembled violently, but she tucked it back into her sleeve before the children could see. She forced herself to stand, turning to face the rows of eyes locked on her. He's okay, she said firmly, though her voice wavered. Do you hear me? He's going to be just fine. The children nodded, some too quickly, desperate to believe her, others slowly, their eyes still full of doubt. The storm roared louder outside, rattling the frame of the bus, shaking it as if trying to tear the thin shell apart. Frost cracked on the windows, spider-webbing across the glass. The children huddled tighter, their small breaths fogging together into one pale cloud. Inside that fragile cocoon of steel and snow, fear was no longer just whispered. It had teeth now, and everyone knew the storm would not stop testing them until someone broke. The storm drove them higher into the pass, shadows staggering after a single scarred shepherd. Bear pressed on despite his limp, snow caking his fur, wind clawing at his face. He didn't stop. Not once. Then, suddenly, he did. Rowan nearly stumbled over him. Bear stood rigid, chest heaving, ears sharp, nose buried in the air. Then he lunged forward. The rescuers followed until the lanterns revealed it. A wall of snow 20 feet high, packed solid by hours of wind. A frozen barricade sealing the road like a tomb. Whitaker swore. "We'll never cut through that." Collins muttered, "It's the mountain telling us to turn back." But Bear didn't hesitate. He hurled himself at the drift, claws tearing. Snow exploded beneath his paws, blood streaking where his nails split. He growled, savage, relentless. "Jesus," Ramirez whispered. Rowan dropped to his knees beside the shepherd. "No, he's telling us this is the way." He plunged his own hands into the snow, clawing until his skin tore. "Don't just stand there. Help him." The rescuers surged forward. Shovels scraped. Pickaxes rang. Sparks flew. Gloves ripped. Fingers bled. The storm shrieked, flinging snow into their faces, trying to blind and bury them. But they dug anyway, their bodies moving like one desperate creature. Grant roared above the wind. "Dig like your own kids are in there." Bear kept at it, paws raw, chest rattling with exhaustion. Rowan shouted through frozen tears, "Bear, you'll kill yourself!" But the shepherd refused. Each falter ended in another furious lunge. Rowan's own hands bled as he clawed beside him. "Then I'll dig with you." Minutes blurred into eternity. For every shovelful carved away, the storm filled the cracks again. Collins sagged to his knees. "We'll never make it." Grant yanked him upright. "They're alive in there. Every second we stop, the cold takes them." He slammed his shovel until sparks burst against the ice. The lanterns guttered, light shrinking. The rescuers looked like statues carved from frost. Still they dug. Bear's growls faded to hoarse whines, but he did not quit. Rowan pressed his forehead to the shepherd's side, whispering, "I hear you, boy. We'll break it. Together." Then the wall groaned. A crack split through the drift. Snow shifted, sloughed away. Behind the white, a faint darkness opened like a promise. "Again!" Grant shouted, voice shredded. Bear barked once, low and guttural, a soldier's command. Forward. Inside the bus, time had slowed to a crawl. The children huddled in clusters, frost sealing the windows, their breath thin in the frozen air. Mrs. Allen sat stiff at the wheel, eyes snapping open every time a whimper stirred from the back. She could not allow herself to sleep. Then came a sound. Faint, a scratch, uneven, like claws on ice. One boy pressed his ear to the glass. "Did you hear that?" Another shook her head. "It's just the storm." The noise came again, louder, scraping, steady, determined. Not chaos, intent. Max, buried in Lily's coat, whispered, "That's not the wind." The children froze, straining to listen. The storm howled, rattling the bus. Beneath it, yes, a rhythm, a dig. One girl whimpered, "What if it's the mountain trying to get in?" Lily shook her head hard. "Mountains don't scratch. That's someone. Someone's out there." Hope flickered across their tired faces. They wanted to believe. Fear had lied for hours. Then it came, a bark, deep, sharp, commanding. The children gasped, heads snapping up. Another bark followed, urgent, not a storm, not the mountain, a dog. Mrs. Allen jerked upright, tears spilling instantly. "Do you hear that?" Voices erupted in disbelief and joy. "It's a dog!" "They found us." "Someone's here." Lily clutched Max fiercely. "I told you. Someone always comes." The scratching grew frantic. Snow shifted above the bus. The children pressed to the glass, pounding with mittened fists. "We're here. We're in here." The storm tried to swallow their cries, but the dog's bark answered, vibrating against the steel walls. One child sobbed, not in fear, but in release. Another laughed through tears. Hope spread like fire. Then the frame shuddered. Frost cracked around the emergency door. With a snap, the door burst inward. Snow spilled inside in a wave, and through it lunged a scarred shepherd. Bear landed in the aisle, coat matted with ice, paws raw and bleeding, eyes blazing with life. He barked furiously, the sound ricocheting through the bus like a war drum. The children erupted in cries of joy. He found us. We're saved. Bear wasted no time. He nosed into clusters of shivering bodies, licked frozen cheeks, pressed his warmth against their skin. Children buried their hands in his fur, clinging as if he were the only real thing in the world. "Stay awake," Rowan's voice bellowed from outside. "Keep them awake, Bear." The shepherd barked in reply, moving from child to child, nudging, pawing, forcing them to stir, to cling to life. Lily gasped when his nose pressed against her arm. She whispered fiercely to her brother, "I told you someone would come." Max reached out, his trembling fingers sinking into Bear's fur. The dog licked his pale face until he giggled weakly, a sound that spread like wildfire. Mrs. Allen stumbled down the aisle, fell to her knees beside the shepherd, hands pressed into his fur. "You angel," she whispered, tears streaming. "You beautiful, stubborn angel." Bear barked again, as if to remind her, no time for thanks. He pushed against the children, keeping them awake, alive. Outside, shovels and axes clanged against the bus frame. Lantern light spilled through the broken door. Rowan shouted, "Blankets coming through! We've got them!" The children screamed in reply, "Help us!" "We're here!" Their voices tumbled together, amplified by Bear's furious bark. One child whispered what all of them felt. "We're saved." The words rippled, repeated in trembling voices until the walls echoed it back. "We're saved. We're saved." Some clung to Bear as if they'd never let him go. Others pressed their faces into his fur, drinking in the warmth of life. The bus was no longer silent. 32 children who had felt buried and forgotten now had proof. The world had not abandoned them. Mrs. Allen pressed her hand to her heart, whispering a prayer. She looked at their faces, wide-eyed and trembling, whispering, "We're saved." And for the first time since the bus had stalled, she let herself believe it too. Bear stood tall in the aisle, chest heaving, paws bleeding, eyes blazing with ferocity that dared the storm to try again. He barked one final time, a sound filled with certainty. The mountain had tried to bury them. The storm had tried to silence them. But hope had broken through the door, and hope had 4 legs. The bus was no longer silent. The broken seal at the back gaped open, and through it came the storm. Snow swirling in like icy smoke, lanterns flaring against the darkness, voices cutting through the wind. "Here! We've got them! Blankets! Hurry!" Boots pounded up the steps. Coats brushed the narrow aisle as rescuers forced their way inside. The sharp scent of kerosene and sweat mixed with the bitter cold. For the children, it was as if life itself had come crashing in, overwhelming and undeniable. Bear barked sharply, leaping aside to give space. But he stayed close, weaving among the children, nudging them to keep awake. He had been their anchor in the dark, and now human hands joined the fight. Blankets unfurled like wings, wrapping shivering bodies one by one. Calloused hands tugged scarves tighter, slid mittens over frozen fingers, rubbed warmth into pale arms. "Easy, sweetheart. We've got you now." "You're safe." Children whimpered, cried, even laughed through chattering teeth as warmth returned in fragments. One boy was lifted into strong arms, his head falling against a rescuer's chest, comforted by the steady thump of a heartbeat beneath his ear. Another rescuer gathered 2 toddlers at once, whispering fiercely, "Not one of you is staying here." The storm howled through the broken door, lanterns swung wildly, voices overlapped in shouts and sobs, but every gesture was an act of desperate love. At the front, Mrs. Allen slumped, her hands trembling. A deputy knelt beside her, laying a blanket across her shoulders. "You held them," he whispered. "You kept them alive." She broke then, sobbing, but the sound of children, alive, awake, clinging, was proof her fight had not been in vain. Lily clutched Max as rescuers reached for them. She refused to let go. "He goes first," she insisted, pushing her brother forward. The man nodded, taking the boy inside his coat. Only then did Lily allow herself to be lifted. She clung to the rescuer's neck, whispering through frozen lips, "I promised them someone would come." "And you were right," he answered. One by one, the smallest children were carried out first, passed carefully down the line, their cries answered instantly by steady voices. "I've got you. Stay with me now. You're going home." The bear moved through the rows, licking faces, barking at children whose eyes threatened to close, nosing until weak fingers clenched again. His paws left bloody prints on the vinyl floor, but he never stopped. "Keep them moving, Bear," Rowan shouted. The shepherd barked in answer, rousing a girl who whispered weakly, "We're saved." Grant climbed inside, his broad frame filling the aisle. Lantern light cut across his jaw as he ordered, "Count them, every child, before we move." Voices tallied, then the cry, 32, they're all here." For a heartbeat, every adult sagged, tears freezing on their lashes. 32, all alive. The bus was no longer a tomb. It was the beginning of home. But they couldn't stay. Sheriff Grant's voice cut through the chaos. "We move now." Single file. The ridge won't wait. The children's eyes widened, but rescuers steadied them, lifting, guiding, tying rope lines around waists. Bear barked once, sharp and urgent, then planted himself at the head of the line. They stepped into the storm. The cold slammed into them like a wall. Snow swirled so thick it was like stepping into another world, white, endless, merciless. The snowmobiles sputtered uselessly. "Leave them," Grant barked. "We're on foot." Ropes linked child to rescuer, rescuer to rescuer. Boots sank knee-deep, children lifted half the time, carried the other. "Stay close. Don't look down. Hold the rope, sweetheart." Radios crackled. "Unit 1, we have the bus. Repeat, we have the bus." "Copy. Parents are standing by. God bless you. Keep moving." Through static came voices trembling with relief and terror. "Please, tell me if my boy's alive." "He's here. They're all here." A sob carried across the frequency, raw and unfiltered. "Thank you." "Oh, thank you." Bear led the line, limping but unyielding, his harness rope taut in Rowan's hand. Every few steps he barked, his voice carrying like a beacon in the void. Children clung harder to the rope. Rowan muttered hoarsely, "Keep us moving, boy. Just keep us moving." The ridge narrowed. On one side, black rock. On the other, an abyss hidden beneath swirling snow. Rescuers pulled children closer, hearts hammering with every step. Eyes up, one step at a time. Boots slipped, but hands caught, steadied. The line never broke. Whitaker carried a boy on his shoulders, frost clinging to his beard. "Hang on tight, you hear?" "I hear," the boy whispered. Behind him, Ramirez cradled a toddler against his chest, murmuring Spanish lullabies, the melody barely audible but enough to calm her trembling. The storm raged harder, furious at their defiance. Snow lashed their faces. Radios sputtered, but the line held. Every few minutes, a voice called, 32. Still 32. It became their heartbeat, their vow. Time ceased to exist. The world shrank to rope, lantern glow, crunch of boots, and Bear, always Bear, barking them forward. Once, Bear stumbled, his limp worsening. Rowan bent low, whispering fiercely, "Not yet, boy. Don't you dare stop." The shepherd pressed on, blood marking the snow with every step. Ahead, a boy tripped, falling face first. His cry was nearly lost in the wind. Bear froze, barking furiously until rescuers rushed forward, lifting the child into strong arms. Only then did Bear move again. "He's not letting us lose a single one," Whitaker muttered, voice rough with awe. The ridge narrowed further. Panic flickered across children's faces, but Bear barked steadily, guiding them step by step. His voice became rhythm, heartbeat, defiance. Lily whispered the words she had clung to all night. "Someone will come." Then, softly, "And he already has." The children repeated after her, their weak voices carried forward by Bear's unyielding bark. Rowan staggered, near collapse. Sheriff Grant shouted from behind, "That dog's running on nothing but willpower. He can't keep this up." Rowan rasped back, "Then neither can we. And he knows it." Even Grant fell silent. Tonight, leadership belonged to the dog. The convoy pressed forward step by step. Children whimpered, rescuers staggered, but every stumble was met by Bear's bark. The children began to answer him. "We're still here. We're not stopping." Their words wove into his rhythm, human voices rising to match the dog's defiance. The storm fought harder, desperate to reclaim them. Lanterns flickered, snow bit into their faces, but Bear's bark never faltered. Ramirez whispered, "It's like he's daring the mountain to take us." "Then the mountain picked the wrong night," Whitaker growled. When the ridge began to widen, the rescuers were nearly spent, their shoulders aching, breaths ragged. But Bear still moved forward, bleeding, limping, unyielding. If he could keep going, so could they. Rowan whispered hoarsely, "He's the pulse of the line." And it was true. In the white hell of Silver Ridge, Bear's voice was proof that life still fought step by step against the storm. At last, the radios crackled again, louder this time. "Rescue team, do you copy? The parents can see your lanterns from the valley." The words jolted the line like a surge of electricity. Children lifted their heads, eyes wide. Rescuers quickened their pace despite burning muscles. Grant roared, "You hear that? They see us! We're bringing them home!" The children whimpered with joy. "Home. We're going home." Snow still lashed them, but somewhere ahead, the storm thinned. Faint golden lights glowed against the horizon, lanterns from the valley, salvation flickering in the distance. And still, Bear pressed forward, limping, bleeding, barking into the storm, as though daring the mountain to try again. The line stretched thin across the ridge. 32 children, tethered by rope and human hands, step by step into the teeth of the storm. And at the very front, the shepherd led them, his voice the drumbeat of survival, carrying them all the way home. The night stretched into something endless, time devoured by the storm, until no one could say how long they'd been walking. Minutes felt like hours, hours like days. The rope lines between them were the only tether to reality, each knot proof they were still together, still moving, Every rescuer's body screamed in protest. Shoulders burned from carrying children, legs trembled, lungs clawed for air. The children had gone quiet, no longer crying, eyes half-lidded, bodies limp in arms or dragging along the snow. Only Bear's bark, sharp and commanding at the head of the line, kept them from surrendering to silence. But even Bear was slowing. His limp dragged now, paws leaving smears of blood, breath ragged. Still, he pressed forward, tail stiff, never letting the line falter. It felt endless. Until it didn't. At first, it was nothing, just a shimmer against the wall of snow. Collins squinted into the haze. Wait, I see. For a long moment, there was only a storm. Then it appeared. A faint golden glow fighting through the blizzard. Lanterns. Town lights. Whitaker's cry cracked the silence. There! The valley lights! Children lifted their faces, eyes widening. Civilization. Warmth. Home. We're almost home, one rescuer shouted, and the words spread down the line like fire. Children sobbed now, but in relief. Lily, clutching Max's hand, whispered, See? Someone always comes. Max's reply shook with belief. I do now. Sheriff Grant's roar was both order and joy. Keep moving. We're bringing them home. Strength surged back into failing legs. The line tightened, steadied, moving like a single body toward the glow. Bear stumbled, caught by Rowan. Easy, boy. You've done it. But Bear tugged forward, eyes locked on the lights. Rowan pressed his forehead to the shepherd's scarred head. All right, take us home. And Bear limped on, children watching his silhouette, drawing strength from it. The storm still fought, but weaker now. Each gust was smaller against the sight of those lights. Children whispered together, voices frail but awed. I can see them. It's real. Their words stitched with rescuers' shouts and Bear's bark until the ridge itself seemed to hum with life. The lights grew larger, lanterns swinging in the hands of waiting figures, parents, silhouettes raising arms, voices faint on the wind. The rescuers choked back sobs, the children clung tighter. The storm hadn't ended, but the fight had. It was no longer survival, it was returned. The fire hall was hushed. Folding chairs lined the walls, but few could sit. Parents paced, coats clutched tight, boots dripping meltwater. Coffee steamed on tables, untouched. Every tick of the clock hammered eternity. Mothers clasped photos, fathers folded arms against trembling. Radios crackled rarely. They've found the bus. They're moving out. Then silence. Just enough to keep hope alive. A mother whispered, My baby's only 6. He hates the dark. Another gripped her hand hard. Don't. They said they were alive. That means alive. At a table, Sheriff Grant's wife poured coffee into cups already full, just to keep busy. Beside her, an old man clutched his granddaughter's scarf, eyes fixed on the bay doors as if willing them open. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, fear grew. Every passing car stiffened the crowd. Every false alarm drained them further. Some whispered prayers, others just listened for engines. Then, faint at first, it came. A low hum through the storm, headlights cutting white. For a heartbeat, silence. Then they cry. They're here. Chaos erupted. Parents surged toward the bay doors, chairs clattering, cups spilling. Sobs filled the air before the vehicles even stopped. The doors flew open. Freezing air blasted in, unnoticed. Lantern light gleamed off rescuers, hunched over small, blanketed figures. Children. Alive. The first rescuer stumbled inside, arms full of a bundled girl. She stirred weakly, breathing. The sound that followed was indescribable. Scream, sob, prayer, laugh, all at once. Her mother collapsed around her, shaking with relief. "Mama," the child whispered, and the hall broke into tears. One by one, children came through, some walking, clinging to ropes, others carried into trembling arms. Each reunion was its own miracle. Sobs shook the walls. "I thought I lost you." Thank God. Parents pressed frantic kisses to cold cheeks, tucked blankets tighter, checked fingers for warmth. For every child carried in, the fire hall grew louder, grief and relief colliding into chaos. Beneath it all lay one truth. They had come home. A town broken by fear was whole again. At last, the final rescuer entered. And then, Bear, the German shepherd, pushed into the hall, paws slipping on wet concrete, fur caked with ice and blood. He limped heavily, but his head was high, eyes searching, counting. Only when he reached the center did his legs buckle. He staggered and fell. "Bear!" Rowan was there instantly, sliding to his knees, scooping the shepherd's head into his lap. Gloves off, bare hands cupped his face. Bear's breath came shallow, eyes fluttering, then locking on Rowan's. "You did it," Rowan whispered, voice breaking. "You brought them home." The children saw him collapse and break from their parents' arms. Wrapped in blankets, boots dragging, they circled Bear where he lay. Small hands reached for his fur, whispers brushed his ears. "Thank you, Bear. You saved us. You're our hero." Bear's ears twitched. His tail moved faintly, one last wag. He pressed his head deeper into Rowan's lap, as though their touch kept him tethered. A boy draped his blanket over Bear. A girl set her doll beside his paws. Another bent low, whispering, "Don't go yet." Rowan's tears spilled into Bear's fur. Sheriff Grant stood at the edge, voice steady. "Every one of you is alive tonight because of him." Parents bowed their heads, some crossing themselves, others wiping faces. The hall filled with reverent silence, the kind reserved for church pews and battlefields. Bear's breathing grew weaker. Rowan bent close, whispering fiercely, "Don't you leave me, boy. Not after everything. You held us together." "You're not done yet." The dog's eyes flickered open, clear and calm, no fear, only the quiet certainty of a soul that had given everything. Children's whispers overlapped into a prayer of gratitude. "We're saved because of you." "You didn't let the storm win." Bear's tail twitched again, a faint acknowledgement. His chest rose in one last ragged breath. Rowan pressed his lips to Bear's ear. "Rest, buddy. You've earned it. Let us carry you now." For the first time, Bear yielded, easing into Rowan's arms. The children stroked his fur, whispered thanks through tears. The fire hall was no longer a place of fear, but a sanctuary. And at its center lay a dog who had carried 32 souls through the storm and into the light. The storm still howled outside, but in Silver Ridge's small county hospital, the night had settled into something quieter, fragile, reverent, heavy with both relief and exhaustion. Beds lined the emergency ward, hastily arranged to hold every rescued child. The smell of antiseptic mingled with the damp wool of thawing coats. Nurses moved quickly, voices calm, though their faces showed urgency. Doctors checked pulses, rubbed circulation back into frostbitten hands, and wrapped ointments on raw skin. The hiss of oxygen tanks mixed with the steady beep of heart monitors. Beside every bed sat a parent. Some prayed silently, lips moving as they clutched tiny hands. Others stroked damp hair, unable to stop touching, reassuring themselves their children were real. One mother kissed her son's forehead again and again. A father pressed his cheek to his daughter's palm, sobbing now that she was safe. And the children, exhausted beyond words, whispered back, "I'm here, Daddy. I'm okay, Mama." At the far end, Lily lay propped against pillows, Max curled at her side. Their mother held both their hands, whispering prayers in rhythm with their breath. Max stirred, murmuring, "You were right. Someone came." Lily smiled faintly. "I promised you." Her mother kissed her forehead. "My brave girl." Not all relief came easily. Mrs. Allen, the bus driver, sat alone near the supply room. Her eyes were swollen, her body trembling with guilt. She whispered to herself, "I should have kept them warm. I should have gotten them home." But then a mother knelt before her. "You saved my son. He said you sang to them, kept them alive." Others gathered, touching her arm, whispering the same word, "Hero." This time, Mrs. Allen broke not into shame, but into their arms. As the ward dimmed, parents stayed with their children, heads bowed against blankets. A boy stirred in his sleep, murmuring, the dog saved us." His mother brushed his hair. "Yes, and he always will." Across town, the veterinary clinic was alive with urgency. Sterile lights shone down on Bear, stretched across a metal table, chest rising in ragged breaths. "Doctor." Whitmore, the town's aging but steady-handed vet, worked carefully, pulling shards of ice from his torn paws. "Steady now," she whispered, though Bear was unconscious. Beside her stood Officer Mark Rowan, fists clenched, eyes raw from sleeplessness. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Worse than I hoped," Whitmore said gently. "The cold reopened old scars. He's lost blood. He may never walk the same way again." The word struck Rowan hard. "You mean he might not work?" She met his eyes. He already did his work. He saved 32 children. No limp erases that. Rowan bent over Bear, tears falling into his fur. "You gave everything, and I couldn't stop you." A nurse entered carrying papers, not reports, but children's drawings. Crayon suns, stick figures in blankets, and always at the center, a brown and black dog with pointed ears. Beneath them, "Thank you, Bear. Our hero. You saved us." Rowan's vision blurred. He whispered, "You hear that, buddy? They already see you the way I do." The next day, the children came. Wrapped in coats, escorted by parents, they filed into the clinic quietly, voices hushed like entering a chapel. Bear lay in a kennel now, paws bandaged, an IV in his leg. At the sound of their footsteps, his eyes fluttered open and his tail thumped faintly. They rushed to the bars. "Bear, you made it!" Their small hands reached through, offering drawings, toys, and a doll's scarf. "This will keep you warm." Bear nosed at the gifts, licking their fingers weakly. For days, children came in shifts, taping drawings to the clinic walls. "Get better, Bear. We need you. You're our guardian." Rowan sat by the kennel each night, whispering prayers. "Come back to us, one step at a time." The storm had passed, but Silver Ridge was forever changed. On Sunday, the church overflowed. Families packed the pews, parents clutching children, still unwilling to let go. Candles flickered along the altar, their flames bending like whispered prayers. Pastor Miller's voice carried softly. "We give thanks for 32 children, for neighbors who braved the mountain, and for a shepherd who would not stop until the lost were found." The doors opened. Rowan entered, Bear limping at his side, paws still wrapped in bandages. A hush fell as the shepherd stepped down the aisle. Then the children rose. They slipped from laps, blankets trailing, boots too big. They surrounded Bear in a circle, hands reaching to stroke his fur. The congregation wept openly. Reporters were present, cameras ready. Headlines already called it the Miracle on Silver Ridge Pass. But no one looked at them. The focus remained on what mattered. Children alive, parents whole, and the battered dog at their center. In the back, Mrs. Allen tried to remain unseen, but Pastor Miller beckoned her forward. Parents and children urged her too. "Please," a boy called. "You saved us." She walked forward hesitantly, only to be pulled into embraces, parents whispering, "You kept them alive." Tears streamed as she finally let herself believe it. At the altar, Bear lay down, surrounded by small hands stroking his ears. A girl placed her crayon drawing before him, a sun with a shepherd at its center. "You're the reason I can still draw," she whispered. Bear's tail thumped once, and the church filled with reverent joy. Pastor Miller's closing words trembled, but were certain. Some will call it luck. Some will call it a miracle. But we know what it was. Love. Love of a community for its children. Love of a handler for his partner. And love of a dog who would not surrender. Outside, cameras waited to broadcast the story. But the truth lived here. In the way parents held their children, in the way Mrs. Allen was lifted by gratitude, and in the way Bear, scarred and weary, rested at the heart of a town forever changed. Weeks passed, and winter's grip on Silver Ridge softened. Snow still banked high along the sidewalks, but the storm was gone. The town was breathing again. At Silver Ridge Elementary, the gymnasium had been transformed. Rows of folding chairs, blue and gold banners, and a polished wooden stage. Parents crowded the back. Children in bright sweaters buzzed at the front. It wasn't a holiday, yet it felt like one. Principal Green stepped to the microphone, her voice trembling before it steadied. "Today we honor a friend, a protector, and a hero." The side doors opened. Officer Mark Rowan walked in, uniform crisp, eyes tired. Beside him limped Bear. Bandaged paws slowed him, but his head was high, ears pricked, eyes fierce. The gym erupted. Cheers, clapping, cries of "Bear!" Parents wiped tears as children stomped and waved their arms. Rowan guided Bear onto the stage. Each thump of his paws echoed like a drumbeat. At the center, Bear paused, chest heaving, tail faintly wagging. Then, as if on cue, he barked once. The gym shook with laughter and cheers. Mrs. Green's eyes glistened. "When the storm tried to take you, this dog refused to stop. He is more than a canine. He is the guardian of Silver Ridge." The children stood, holding crayon drawings they had carried for weeks, snowy buses, blankets, and always a shepherd at the center. Rowan knelt, pressing his forehead to Bear's scarred head. "They'll remember you long after us," he whispered. Then Lily stepped forward, mittened hand clutching something. The gym hushed. She knelt beside Bear and opened her palm, a medal cut from cardboard, wrapped in foil, tied with red yarn. Its face read in uneven letters, "Our hero." She slipped it over his neck. "Because you never gave up on us." Bear leaned forward and licked her cheek. The gym erupted again, applause and tears colliding. For parents, it was unbearable relief. For children, pure joy. But then silence returned. Lily clung to his neck, whispering thanks. The foil medal caught the light like a star. The gym remained quiet, reverent, until applause rose again. Slower this time, deeper, filled with awe. That night etched itself into memory. A dog, scarred but proud, honored not with gold, but with a child's trembling hands. Years passed. At the crest of Silver Ridge Pass, a bronze plaque gleamed against stone, in honor of Bear, whose howl through the storm brought our children home. Mark stood before it, Bear at his side, muzzle streaked with grey, but eyes still sharp. Families gathered, laying flowers and notes. Thank you for never giving up. Children now grown traced the carved words, whispering gratitude. Parents recounted that night. The fear, the waiting, and the single howl that cut through the storm like a promise. A father bent to his son. Remember the howl? I'll never forget, the son replied, pressing his hand to the stone. Snow drifted over the pass, soft and quiet. The mountains seemed to hold the memory themselves. Mark knelt beside Bear, brushing his scarred shoulder. You remember, he murmured. Bear leaned into him, no words needed. Every scar, limp, and whisker spoke the story better than any human could. Families lingered, children, now parents themselves. They knelt to press foreheads to Bear's fur. He endured it with dignity, his tail sweeping the snow as if blessing them all. A young girl placed a drawing against the stone. Bear with a glowing halo, guiding children through the storm. Mark covered her hand gently. He still hears you. I know, she whispered. I can feel it. Bear lifted his head, ears twitching as though he nodded. He exhaled a low breath, rumbling like distant thunder. The sun dipped, shadows stretching across the pass, protective, not menacing. Mark patted Bear's head. Behind them, the plaque caught the last light, promising the story would endure. Generations would remember the howl that defied the storm, the shepherd who became a lifeline and a legend. And when winter winds swept through the ridges, families would whisper, "Thank you." Certain Bear could still hear. For Silver Ridge, his legacy would never fade. A hero, a guide, a friend, forever. Stories like Bear's remind us why we love dogs so deeply. Their loyalty, their courage, and the way they become our anchors in moments of fear and uncertainty. German Shepherds, in particular, seem to carry an almost uncanny understanding of us, sensing danger, offering comfort, and connecting without words. Watching them move with purpose, protect those they love, and stand steadfast in the face of hardship, we see more than heroism. We see devotion in its purest form. It's a reminder, too, that the bonds we share with our own dogs hold quiet power. A touch, a glance, a simple walk together can become a language of trust and love. If you've ever wondered how to deepen that connection, I've found some gentle, thoughtful guidance that can help you listen, respond, and truly understand your dog in ways you might not have noticed before. Take a moment to explore it, not as a task, but as an opportunity to grow together, like friends, like family. Because in the end, these moments of shared understanding are what make the love we give and receive from our dogs so endlessly meaningful.